Now, our next discussion, changing format a little bit here, and this is really going to be a treat for you, I think, going to be led by one of the best reporters in the whole automotive business. I'll talk about in a moment. Our topic here, we're going to be looking at this whole idea of the West Coastification, if you will, of how the power center of innovation and thinking and technology isn't so much shifting to California as much as it's at least being shared between California and Detroit. Maybe it is swinging in a true pendulum fashion to the west. It's one of the biggest talking points going on in the auto industry right now, especially around the topics that we're dealing with here today. So please welcome to lead the panel and also take some questions I know you're going to have for this panel as well. Neal Boudette, reporter for Automotive News, past for Wall Street Journal, one of the best reporters on automotive in the world.
All right, good afternoon. So we're here to talk about the intersection between Silicon Valley and Detroit. And of course, we're using those terms in a general way. We don't mean specifically Silicon Valley and Detroit, sort of shorthand for the automotive industry. But let me introduce the members of our panel. First, Frankie James is Managing Director, Advanced Technology, Silicon Valley Office, ATSVO at General Motors. Nick Sugimoto is Senior Programming Director at Honda's Silicon Valley Lab. And newly promoted Chief Technology Officer, Toyota North America, previously Toyota Motor Sales, Nick Couric. So I'm going to have you sit there because they mic'd me up to be over here.
What did we mess this up completely?
Let me just say a few words to sort of set the scene, and then we'll get into what we're talking here. I think we can all agree it's a fascinating time for the auto industry. I mean, the pace and extent of change that we're going through is really unprecedented. I don't know that any industry has ever gone the kind of change that the auto industry is experiencing today. And it's even more dramatic when you look at the 100-year history of the auto industry. If you really look back over the past century, and think of that word, century, there's been relatively little change in this business. We've had internal combustion engines. They've pretty much stayed the same. I mean, I remember my first car was a 1969 Chevy Chevelle with a 3 on the tree. I had 3 pedals on the floor. The car I drive now is a 6-speed automatic transmission. Well, I've only got 2 pedals, but it's got a manual mode. I mean, it's in 50 years, that's not a whole heck of a lot of change. But if you look at where we are today, in that we're questioning the entire concept of what is a car. Is it a pod that we ride around in? Do we drive it? Are we a co-pilot? Are we merely an occupant? Are we an active driver? So we're really going through very, very fundamental change, and much of that change is being driven from out here in California, Silicon Valley, just the big names of the disruptors that we talk about, Apple, Google, Tesla, NVIDIA, Uber. And so that's what we're here to talk about, and I think this presents quite a contrast between the way the auto industry is used to working and the way Silicon Valley works. Now, Frankie James has a story, and I'm going to ask her to tell it because I think this really gets to the heart of the matter. And for me, the moral of this story is if you crash your bike, it can be a career break for you or a big break for your company. So I'm going to ask Frankie to tell this story, and then we'll get into more of the discussion about the intersection of Silicon Valley and Detroit.
Okay, so my team is focused on technology and trend scouting. We're looking for new technologies to bring into our vehicles. And I like to say that Silicon Valley is a very 24/7 kind of culture. We don't do business sort of during normal business hours in normal ways. We kind of bump into each other in various ways. And one of the ways that we meet startups can be kind of unconventional. And I had someone on my team who happened to be out mountain biking one weekend, and he was mountain biking along and crashed into somebody, as you sometimes do in a mountain bike. And while they got up and were cleaning themselves off, the first question you ask in Silicon Valley is, after, are you okay, is what do you do? And the person he crashed into said, well, I've got a startup, and my person said, well, we look for startups that are doing automotive things. And so this guy described what he was doing, and it turns out that it was relevant for automotive. And so we went pretty far with this company and ended up going pretty far down a prototyping path and looking into potentially doing an investment and so forth, and actually did some work. So you can meet people in the darndest ways, and you just...
Now, did anybody get hurt in this bike accident here?
No, there were no injuries. Right. There may have been a few scrapes on the bikes, but it was all good.
Okay. So I think that perfectly describes what can happen out here. And I think many people generally have an idea of how the auto industry works. It's structured, hierarchical. What the work needs to be bulletproof. As one person said, the auto industry likes to engineer the hell out of a product. So to get more into this topic, there's a phrase that is often talked about out here. I think it's foreign to most people in the auto industry, and that is MVP. So Nick, can you explain what MVP is, at least in terms of the tech community use of the term?
MVP stands for minimum viable product.
Minimum viable product. So what do you mean by that?
Well, that's not really fully baked to the bulletproof level, but that proves that it's a feasible idea to be productized as a commercial product. That's MVP.
But is that a foreign concept for people on the automotive side of things, that you can do a product that basically it works?
Well, inside R&D facility, probably all car companies are following that process. First, some idea, then POC and MVP and whatever they call, and mature the prototype into a product, and eventually that goes into a car. So it's pretty much probably the same process, but the time frame is way different from Silicon Valley speed. In Silicon Valley, every new product comes in every 6 months or 3 months, or even could be distributed every week as an update of an app. But car, we cannot do that way. So it's a very different.
So I think you mentioned a key word there of speed. And Nick, I'm going to turn to you. Now, you've worked on both sides here in high tech and in automotive. Give us a little bit about your background, how you ended up on the automotive side now, and then talk a little bit about the differences in speed in terms of working in a high-tech environment and an automotive environment, and then also where you are now as Chief Technology Officer, trying to put the two together.
Yeah, great question. I spent some time in Microsoft where software is developed in more of an agile way, and you release products much faster, especially now with the cloud products. You just release them on a weekly basis and sometimes even daily basis, certain features and functions. On the vehicle side, however, it follows the waterfall methodology. It takes a long time to plan, to spec, to design, to write code. Requirements are very different. The vehicle can't get a blue screen. That service needs to be on all the time. You can't have a certain service die on you on the road. That happens in the vehicles. The vehicles get shut down and what have you. But the vehicle needs to be reliable, a lot more reliable than that application that you write for a PC or a mobile or what have you. So it's a different requirement. However, the software development and software cost, general vehicle cost, is moving away from a traditional supply chain to more electronics and software-based cost, and that drives different kind of requirement for automotives to develop software. So Tesla has done a great job updating their software at a much faster pace than the rest of us automotives have done. Now, what we can do, what we have done is certain services that are outside of the vehicles. We follow the agile methodology. So, for example, our Lexus Inform remote software, we update that software very fast, and on a sort of a monthly cycle. We add features, we change services, but it's a mobile application that touches the vehicle. We don't deal with the vehicle side. We don't want to mess with the vehicle side. But on the cloud services that they enable those functions, we do follow more agile methodology.
So there's kind of a dividing line there. If we're talking about technology or especially software that's in the vehicle, that's something that needs to move at kind of automotive industry speed. And if it's something you're developing that's around the vehicle, that's something that can move more at a Silicon Valley speed. Maybe Frankie or Nick, can you jump in on that point?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you're talking about engine control software, you certainly want that to be very secure. You absolutely want to be bulletproof. You actually, want to put in all the effort to make sure that you've got every safeguard in place. But if what you're putting out is a connected service, if every once in a while a connection drops, if I'm trying to book a hotel or whatever the service is, or if, sometimes, a screen goes down, or, in that case, it's not quite as vital, and most people, I would think, would accept it because it's sort of what happens on your consumer devices.
And also, I think, there are a couple of viewpoints on this. Of course, the software that goes into a car has to be bulletproof and has to be quality assured, of course. But does not necessarily mean it has to be automobile speed, right? We can do faster if we find a way. So that's one thing we are trying to really hard to accelerate. Another way is to decouple the functions from onboard system and to put some maybe application in the phone side or on the cloud.
Can you give us an example of something that could be decoupled?
Oh yeah, Android Auto and CarPlay are great examples. Bring your phones into a car, and apps on your phones project the screen onto your car screen, and you can use HMI devices on board. The core function is on the phone side, and we can update even weekly, right? So that's another kind of viewpoint to accelerate the innovation for car user experience.
Now, all three of you are interesting individuals or unique individuals in that you've got a foot in each camp. You're a part of an automotive company, but you're the link to the high-tech environment. What are some of the frustrations or hurdles that you face in developing or discovering new technology that you want to run with, and on the other side, you've got a large traditional organization that doesn't necessarily move? Ned, anything come to mind with Toyota in that?
Well, I want to say probably that was a real challenge a few years back. I think as of late, there's a realization that we really have to put some significant effort in this, and from the highest level in a corporation. Just recently we decided to invest in an AI company, for example, $1 billion over 5 years with Stanford and MIT, and in the offices, in Silicon Valley office, as well as Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I think there's a realization now. 2 years back, I have to say, it wasn't there, and it was difficult to say, hey, we really have to focus on software and experience and delivering software faster. Even if it's in a vehicle, we need to shorten that development cycle from 4 years to maybe 2 years, and maybe 12 months, maybe even do over-the-air update. And over-the-air update was a bad word 2 years ago, but today over-the-air update is like, yeah, we got to do that. And so it's just a question when and how, and how do we deal with policies and requirements that the government's puts.
I think you mentioned that investment by Toyota in artificial intelligence, and that's really an extraordinary development. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what is Toyota's thinking about that? What are you hoping to achieve? And is this the first step? Are there going to be more? Give us a little more granularity on that particular.
So what I can say is that safety and reliability are two top priorities for Toyota. And if you look at artificial intelligence, there's tons of work that can be done on a safety front to create certain controls with the AI to crash avoidance and automated braking and all kinds of different things that AI can augment driver's behavior in a vehicle. And so that's going to be first effort, and most of the focus is going to be there on a safety side first. And then as development progresses, Obviously, autonomous is, goal for all the automotive companies, and that's where the, end game is for all of us.
Does that represent a kind of change of thinking? I think if you go back a number of years in the auto industry, certainly there was a not invented here element or mindset. Does this represent a kind of change in thinking about new technology and how Toyota has to acquire
Well,
it?
it's not a secret that Silicon Valley influence on automotive industry is great. I mean, you got Uber, you mentioned Tesla, you mentioned Google and Apple. I mean, it is becoming a software business. We're becoming part of a software business. Every corporation is a software corporation, and so that that essentially influenced the way we think, and other automotives, not necessarily just Toyota, but others have realized that we are into software business, and our supply chain, our traditional supply chains got to change. Or needs to be augmented, I should say. We have traditional supply chain. You got a body, you got a parts, you got all these things. Now the new supply chain is all that. Maybe simplify all that, but you got a software supply chain that you have to deal with.
So you're all in this hybrid position with a sort of a foot in each camp. And I know you're doing some interesting things about how to bridge the divide. And Honda's got an internship program. And Nick, why don't you elaborate on that? Tell us about this internship program, how it got started, what the point is.
Yeah, Honda has been in Silicon Valley for 15 years. And first we started as a small computer science research office. Then we expanded to do corporate venture capital program. And then we transformed the VC team into more open innovation lab to create proof of concept with Silicon Valley community, startups and Google and Apple. Through doing that, Honda realized that, oh my gosh, Silicon Valley is really the origin of Honda. Honda started as a motorcycle company after the World War II, almost startup company by Mr. Honda. So that experience in Silicon Valley reminded everybody, oh yeah, we came from there. This is our spirit, the original spirit. So we started accepting corporate internal trainees, mostly from Japan and some from other R&D facility in the US, and host them for 6 months or so to work together with startup company to really learn how they think, how they act, how fast they move, to bring that experience back to the mother organization to be the change agent for.
So that's interesting. So while there may be some sort of technology transfer, what you're really looking for there is a culture transfer.
It is, definitely. Not just technology, but also the way of thinking and culture. That's really the key part to change the big organization like that.
All right. Frankie, I'm going to ask you about GM and the orientations you do, but before that, I need you to explain Frankie to me.
Explain?
Yes, your name.
Okay. It's not shorter than my original name. It's just better.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, what is your original
It's
name?
Francis, which I never use.
Francis, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Frankie is an alternative to Francis. I didn't know whether Frankie was actually your first name or what.
Yeah.
But you have this program where you do some orientations with people from the mothership back in the Rensen.
It's not really an official program. What happened was, we had been talking about the fact that there's a lot of things happening in Silicon Valley that are potentially automotive related. Silicon Valley is a very different culture from what's back in Detroit. And so my boss asked us to take some folks from research who we think are great people, and to actually expose them to Silicon Valley culture so that they understand better where we're coming from, and to have them help us come up with new business ideas and sort of ways to push GM into the future. And so we brought a whole bunch of people out. I think it was about 20 people. We brought them out to Silicon Valley, and we basically exposed them to Silicon Valley. And one of the things that's big in automotive right now is the whole idea of car sharing and the whole sharing economy. And so we said to them, okay, you're coming out for this workshop. We're going to talk to you about these different things. We're going to talk about autonomous. We're going to talk about sharing. We're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. We said, so we want you to be exposed to this. So don't book a hotel. You're not allowed to book a hotel. You're not allowed to take taxis. We're going to teach you how to use Uber and Lyft, and we're going to teach you about Airbnb, and you are going to use those. Unless you've got some, really strong reason, you're going to try it. And so we made them try it, and then we took them out, and they tried it out. We had a debrief session later. They learned a lot. They were like, oh my gosh. We took them to see all these different, we took them to a Tesla showroom to see how, Silicon Valley sort of sells cars. We took them to a bunch of other things that we thought were interesting, and we really got them thinking about the Silicon Valley approach. And you mentioned the minimum viable product. I think minimum viable product is different from a proof of concept, because the whole point of a minimum viable product is to have something that is minimally something a customer will pay for, so that you can learn if you're on the right track. Is this something that customers actually want? If you build a perfect product that no customer wants, it's not so perfect. But if you build something that customers want but doesn't have quite enough features, you can always expand on that. So one of the things that we did was we brought them around to these different showrooms and things, and there was one particular product, which I can't say what it is, that we brought them to see, and they were all like, oh my gosh, the build quality on this is, oh my God, look at those welds. And we said, time out. This is not about weld quality. This is about the fact that these people are selling this technology. They have people buying this. We want to do something in this space, and we are engineering the hell out of it before we even put it in front of customers. What do you think they're going to learn compared to what we're going to maybe learn if we ever get this out the door? And to try to get them thinking about the whole, let's do a minimum viable product and see if our customers want it, and maybe turn and pivot and tweak to have something really awesome, versus what we do, which is we build and build and build, and we build something that is absolutely, stellar and gorgeous and beautiful, but may not fit a need that people actually have. And so that's one of the things that we truly think is important about Silicon Valley, that we truly wanted to get across to these folks.
Okay. And I think all three of you have some interesting stories and some successes that you've actually implemented. Ned, you briefly mentioned it, with Lexus and their Diagnostic program. Could you elaborate a little bit on that and how you're doing that? And I know you're able to update the system, not flash the car, but actually the diagnostic software itself, much more like a software company, like a Microsoft would do. Elaborate a little bit on that and give us an example of a success story here.
It's interesting. I mean, most of you that know Toyota, you know about the concept of Kaizen, or continuous improvement. And so Toyota is famous for that, and we do a phenomenal job in the production systems and the processes. And if you look at the agile software development is actually built on a Kaizen idea. The folks that put it together, they look at the Toyota process and say, okay, how can we develop software faster? And they say, well, this is how Toyota develops, this is how Toyota development process goes in the production, and can we apply that to software? And they build this agile software development methodology. So this process of Toyota is essentially going back to what Toyota invented originally. So what we did is say, okay, can we change all our processes in the software development side to follow just Kaizen? I mean, we're not talking about agile and this new term that came out of Silicon Valley or anything like that. We've done agile for 50 years, and we are very good at that, but we did it on the manufacturing side. So let's apply that towards software development. So it's an easy pill to swallow on our end. So what we do now in the software development side of things is we use agile methodology. We do, we develop software just the way that Silicon Valley develops software on a number of programs, whether it's internal programs or this particular one on the Lexus. So we do update our software just the way that Silicon Valley companies and new technology companies update. We go through 2-week sprints. We test it, we go with business, we test with users, and then we launch and update the application. So we don't necessarily update every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We want to make sure that a lot of these things going to work. The vehicle's got to open when you push that button most of the time, and it does. But we have changed our processes to do that. And so this is our first large program where we deploy the agile methodology that touches vehicles and customers, and all other follow-on programs will follow the same process.
And Nick, you've got a pretty interesting example involving Siri, where Honda sort of shifted into high gear and moved pretty quickly and got some Siri technology into your vehicle. Tell us that story.
Sure. When we were doing corporate venture capital, we came across with a company called Siri. It was an independent startup spun out of SRI. And we were so impressed by the kind of smoothness and the natural feeling of the user interface, I mean the speech interface. So we tried to put it in a car. But one day, Apple came in and bought them, and the conversation kind of stopped. But a few months later, we had a chance to talk to Apple, and we learned Apple is putting Siri into the iOS, which is great for us because everybody has iPhone. Just bring your iPhone and connect with the car over the Bluetooth, then you can use Siri from steering switch button, and you hear Siri voice coming through the car speakers. So you feel like your Siri is almost embedded in the car. We built the prototype quickly and show what the user experience will look like. Like Frankie said, the value for customer is really the most important thing. So we demonstrated that and brought the vehicle to Apple and showed it to them. And they really get excited. And we proposed them, hey, today's Siri shows all the search results on the phone, which is not good for car driver use case. So why don't you create a special mode for car when iPhone is connected to the car? Don't show anything on the phone and just talk back all the search results or whatever results over Siri. And they liked the idea, okay, then we will make it. And they said, and we also started defining the protocol to shake hands between iPhone and the car. And we kind of learned, oh, okay, this is a minor software modification on the Bluetooth module. So maybe we can accommodate this as a reflashing the existing Bluetooth unit of the vehicle we already sold. So, in next year, it was 2012, and 2013, we introduced the first, actually, retrofit service, which was the first in Honda history, asking our customers to bring your car to our dealership, and we reflashed the Bluetooth unit to be able to accommodate Siri hands-free, eyes-free mode to our cars, which we already sold. So it was a very fast process, and it was not just Silicon Valley team. Of course, our product team in Ohio and Japan, we worked globally very hard to introduce this new software module as a retrofit, which was a big first experience for Honda to introduce new feature in such a short time.
Great. And Frankie, you've got a project called, or at least it was at one point called Stonehenge, that for a company like GM, it's pretty remarkable that this got going and got off the ground. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, going back to what I was saying about one of the big things going on in automotive right now is around car sharing. And so what we've done is we've got a pilot that's happening with an apartment complex in New York City. I think the official name of it is something like Let's Drive New York City. And the apartment complex may be called Stonehenge. But the idea is that residents of this luxury apartment building have access to Chevrolet vehicles for a certain number of hours each month. I believe it's 10 hours per month.
So there's a fleet of vehicles in the apartment building, and they're essentially shared vehicles, and as part of your monthly rent, you get whatever 5 hours it is or 10 hours it is.
And you can pay to have more hours, but the idea is that when you live in New York, owning a car is expensive, parking is expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people maybe don't want to own a car, but every once in a while you need a car. You need it, to do some amount of shopping. You need it to go visit someone. And so we're offering a certain number of hours per month when you can use a Chevrolet vehicle. I believe there are also maybe a couple of Cadillac Escalades mixed in there, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Where you can basically be exposed to these GM vehicles in a manner that's useful for your particular lifestyle. And so we're trying that out and see how it goes. But it's fantastic.
We do have a few minutes left, so we can take questions if there are questions. If anybody wants to line up at the microphone, please do so. I'll ask One last question, and maybe we can just get a brief answer or two, and then see if there are questions. But I wonder if the three of you, any advice for people working in the auto industry who are trying to bridge this cultural divide between Silicon Valley and Detroit. Any advice?
Come to Silicon Valley and spend some time.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably the best way to learn the difference, and maybe identify the opportunity for change. Yeah, come see it. That's my advice.
All right, open your mind then. Ned, any advice?
I'd say there's fantastic work that's been going on in Silicon Valley, and I'd say everybody should come and see and experience and engage. But I also, you know, there's a warning flag as well. There's a lot of stuff that happens in Silicon Valley that is just chasing a big money, chasing the dollars, chasing the venture capitalists, and a lot of these things are just investment that goes down the drain. So Frankie and I had a little bit of a disagreement on that, but you know, I caution a lot of these ideas are fantastic and they're worth, you know, going and chasing. But there's a certain realities that I think, you know, automotive companies and Silicon Valley need to come together and sort of agree to. So there's excitement, there's a lot of great things. The software will rule the world. It's all about the software. Yet there is a lot of stuff that needs to be rethought, and there's a lot of attention to be paid to details.
We have a question.
Yes, hi, I'm Greg Tarr. I'm a former Toyota employee from 25 years ago and now working with Glimpse and Automatic. And my question is related to the cadence of working with your startups who you're very engaged with. We've had a great experience with all of you, but sometimes there's your larger vendor partners and they're not necessarily working in the cadence that you want them to. So I'm wondering, even if you get your own organizations moving quicker, what can you do to get your vendors also moving so that the innovators up in Silicon Valley can deliver what you want? So I want to just get your thoughts on that. I know it's a longer process.
Well, I mean, I certainly feel like a lot of the tier ones, I'll give props to some of our tier ones like Delphi and Continental and so forth. They've got similar offices to what we have in Silicon Valley, and they are trying really hard to work with startups and to push the technology. So I feel like they're you know, making a lot of the same strides that we're trying to make, and probably, you know, they're facing the same cultural issues that we are. But I feel like it's the whole supply chain is in this together, and it's not just the OEMs, you know, and we're going to bop the tier ones over the head. The tier ones are trying just as hard as we are. So.
Yeah, my team also works with the tier one Silicon Valley offices very often.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a team effort.
I think there's a great question. I think, you know, the tier ones and the whole supply chain needs to be rethought. And I think in a lot of these things, we need to augment our supply chain. And I think we're going to continue to work with tier ones very closely. But I think adoption of additional players as tier ones and or working to augment the tier ones opportunities is definitely there. I mean, you know, Automatic is, you know, we've been working with Automatic for a while now and we're trying to figure out how do we bring that through tier ones or directly some of those components. So it's,
I think we have, I'm sorry.
Thoughts that need to be, you know, further discussed internally with companies. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more quick question.
Yes, Seiji Kawakami from Bose. I have a question regarding the definition of minimum viable product. As a development engineer, former development engineer, I love to polish, right? Try to optimize and all of that. So my question is, for feature set that are not safety critical, such as infotainment systems, what is the difference in the definition of minimal viable product between Silicon Valley mindset and Detroit or traditional automotive OEM mindset?
Well, typical venture capitalist advice, why I used to run venture capital team, you know, focus on your core value and strip off all unnecessary, nice to have features. So what is your core function, core value, which customer will pay for it? That's really the core you need to stick to and you need to prove by building MVP.
Yep, agree.
Okay. We'll take one more if we can keep this one short.
Sure. My name is Kari Rubini. I'm from a consulting firm called Civic Projects. We've heard about the cross-pollination between Silicon Valley and Detroit. What does Los Angeles or Southern California represent to you other than a market?
This is great. This is another conversation that we had, earlier before, and I said, one of the best developers that exist in the world are here in the Silicon Valley. And if you look at, WhatsApp or Oculus or a couple of other great companies down here, in Southern California, they're also in Seattle. If you look at what's happening in Puget Sound in Seattle or Cambridge and Boston area. So the Silicon Valley is important. It's absolutely important. But I think there's these other centers where we found a lot of successes. Southern California, Boston, and Seattle as well. So we do have special relationship with all the 4 regions at Toyota.
And I think we decided before this panel that all of us have design firms down here. Our design branches have presence in Southern California. This is a hugely important place for designers. This is where they want to be. This is where they get inspiration, and we love having them here. I mean, car culture in California is really cool. It's not the same as car culture in Michigan. And actually, car culture in Southern California, I feel, is different than car culture in Northern California. And we've got to embrace all of it because we learn so much when we look at what's happening.
All right. Well, I feel honored to have been able to moderate this panel. I thought it was a terrific discussion. I can't thank you all enough, Ned, Nick, Frankie. Thank you so much for today. And that's it for us. We'll move on to the next session.
Great.